Well, let's see if we can make something that is so good to be there that it is self-sustained because people want to be there. But yes, this is a perennial political issue that is beyond the ACT borders as well. Yes, absolutely. And yeah.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
I was part of the 100 people that you were surveying. We haven't had many. We've had a couple of meetings, and then you've had the sort of public ones. But I'm assuming there'll be more later on down the track because
the community panel.
Yeah, the community panel.
Yeah. So we were going to try and organise. This is very
Hang on, do you want to come? Just, I'm not sure why. I know. I'm not sure how wide the camera is. So just in case it's not getting us.
We had planned to have a session sort of where we presented those pillars, worked them up further at the end of 12th of December or 9th of December, as I think when we were.
First week in December.
Yeah.
We pulled the plug on a lot of them just because we were recognising this.
It was just.
This term's just been, everyone's getting smashed from every angle and we're feeling it in lots of different places. And we really felt that people were done a lot earlier this year than they have in the past. And we didn't want to keep hammering along, doing things that people weren't able to come along to. So we did pause. So we are looking to do more workshops in February and re-engage with the community panel in February as well. And then the community panel as we move forward through that process as well.
One of the things that wasn't really touched on was this question sometimes that were put to them that I picked up was that they mentioned about the importance of the connection of the existing town centre with what you're planning on doing in the east. And that's actually been brought up by the development that we're just talking about that hasn't gone to DA yet, but was about how does this development work in with the cinema that's kind of next door, because if obviously it creates this massive barrier like the Berlin Wall, between these two sections, it's going to be very difficult to draw people out from the town centre into this area, which was really that focus about hopefully it's not just residential apartments, hopefully it will be more retail, it'll be something that'll draw people into that area as well. But because that blocks of land have sort of already been sold along that edge, essentially you could potentially have something that's quite a barrier between the two sections that you're trying to create. And so that's why I'm curious about it. It is really good to see it being looked at it as a precinct. And I have to say, this fills me with a lot of, positivity to look at that, to say, finally, somebody's really, because that's what the Community Council and particularly Peter has been talking about for a long time. Can you please look at this as a precinct and really look at it and sort of say, well, what can we do with this? Because as you mentioned, very rare for you to get the opportunity to do that. And what we've put to, the other thing that we've got is the Chief Minister's sort of department was looking at a prospectus to put out for government agencies to move in there. But one of the things the Community Council was saying, can we widen that to stop thinking about it as could only be federal government departments, but what about retail? What about
plus more?
Plus more. Yeah, and that sort of thing. And one of the things we were talking about was if blocks of land were sold there, currently there was 200 square metres was sort of the limit. And things that even the developers themselves, when they were buying the blocks of land, they would say, we would like to put something bigger, but we can't because the planning restrictions are actually stopping them from thinking outside of the box. So I think that's good so far. Excellent work.
Well, we look forward to digging into it in January, so we'll look forward to seeing you again. Good.
Anyone have any other questions?
I was just going to add to what Ben and Jennifer were saying, that what was really interesting, Victoria Park, which Ben showed, the central park in that scheme is about 1.3 hectares. And that is probably about the scale of park that we need to actually make it work. And that is dog central, that park. It is really, really active. But it's also located just opposite this interesting retail centre. But it's also the way this space is used temporarily during the day. So it has to be able to be used for different functions at different times of day, and that it needs to be what we call permeable, so that you don't get these sort of barriers to pedestrian movement, and that it's connected and diverse and really, really well made.
It's interesting, Victoria Park also is a flood detention basin, but the water sensitive urban zone which cleanses is also a public artwork. So it actually operates on many levels.
Yeah, just a question, of all those examples you've given, including Victoria Park, were they owned and developed by a single proponent, or a single
No.
developer?
No.
Or were they all the blocks individually sold off?
Correct. Adern is not that far ahead, so I'm not sure. I can't speak for that. But Victoria Park, multiple developers have been developing different blocks over time.
But under...
Victoria Park was Landcom.
Yep.
And it was during the 90s and the 2000s that it was largely planned, but the actual way that each individual urban block was delivered, they were broken into a series of pieces rather than one homogenous developer. But they had design competitions to actually deliver it. So the procurement of design and the procurement of place was incredibly sophisticated. And the other thing, and the public domain is
Public domain
really
first.
the other thing which is really remarkable. The quality of the streets are beautiful. The way that waste is handled, the way that that unloading and unloading for retail is handled is really subtle, doesn't dominate place.
They're
So
some
there's
of the best streets in urban Australia, actually.
so these are really good examples that we want to learn from and bring them to Gungahlin, because they're barriers at the moment to creating great places.
But actually, you've got an example in Canberra. Campbell Section 5 is as good or better than Victoria Park in a Canberra context, and the SLA, under an earlier name, delivered it. Yep.
How strong was the retail need for the responses that you get? Because from my experience, I hear this all the time, that people say, we need more retail within the town centre, because if you don't have the density of that retail, I will go other places. I will go to Belconnen, I'll go to the city, I'll go to these other areas. And so I'm curious what your sort of surveys and things have brought about in that regard.
So what was interesting is that retail was part of that town centre priorities, and yes, it was selected, but nowhere near as often as the compact, urban, walkable, the civic and community amenity discussions. So there was other priorities picked before the retail, and for some groups, the young professionals, retail was important, but for them also everything else was important as well, so they wanted all those components. So I suppose in a list of priorities, retail was there, but it wasn't the strongest. But then in terms of the retail offering, people were sort of talking about all the other major offers, but then they were saying more bespoke, interesting, food at all different price points and price range was quite an important part of that retail mix. So eating, sharing meals at various price points was part of that retail mix. So it wasn't all just sort of large format David Jones, for instance, which actually, those sorts of things came up a little bit, but not as much as what I've seen in other places.
It's interesting you asked that, of course, but even if retail might have come back a little bit lower down the run, it's not an
It's all of
the
them.
above.
Yeah.
And when you get a vibrant mix in a town centre, it attracts those other things, and it is a bit chicken and egg.
Which is why one of those key concerns was, how do you get this mix right for Gungahlin, and how do we...
We want to make sure we don't prevent any of those things. You might not have the demand for it for day one, but you want the place plan and the controls to allow for that to evolve over time and allow for early buildings. For instance, if you've got a row of terraces, and this happens in many main streets in Sydney now, they're not houses anymore, they're shops, because the high ceiling on the ground floor of a terrace is easily convertible over time. So you could start with something that lends itself to lots of different uses 5 years, 10 years down the track.
You talked about the 18 hours one, so which I'm really interested, because what we see in the other town centres, it's all active in the morning and then there's no life in the night time. So I think that kind of balance would make the town centre very vibrant throughout the day and then probably in the evening as well. So, which is a good thing. But like in terms of the issues that we have at the moment, getting in, getting out of the town centre in the current scenario, it's a nightmare. So that's the one good reason for people to avoid coming to the town centre. And the other reason is we don't have enough variety in Gungahlin, so people has to go to Belconnen or maybe to the other side of the town to get what they want. So I think it would be great to consider those things as well. And with the health facilities as well, there should be, if you have considered some kind of, space for health, room for some health hub or something, which ACT government was talking about, which we don't know what it is all about, but it would be good to have some kind of health-based thing, so people want to do some kind of testing, or it's all in one place. They can come, it's everything is there, because at the moment they have to go for one test, the blood test is on the side, and the other one is the other side. So we can bring some kind of a space where it's all brought into one campus, so all the health facility will be kind of there, so all the blood or whatever the testing that needs to be done. So those kind of, if you think about those things as well, good. So we're looking really forward to see how you're going to keep engaging with the community and stuff. The one thing is, the key is, like, at the moment we don't have that kind of employment opportunities, so anything with the business and those kind of retail would be a good thing for Gungahlin. Cool. One final question from Kevin. Yeah.
Whereabouts are you going to put our St Vincent's Hospital?
Would you like me to transplant our St Vinny's from Darlinghurst, or no? Don't you? Well, that's not too bad. St Vinny's is all right. Yeah, I had to drop a friend there last week. I think as part of the process that we're not into yet, obviously, as the thing develops, it will go to education, it'll go to ACT Health, it'll go to various major stakeholders within government, and we'll be looping their feedback, and they'll have lists of things we don't know about yet, priorities we don't know about yet. But we're very keen. I suppose if ACT Health tells the SLA we are going to do this, then we will look at where we absolutely could fit it. But I have no idea whether that's even on a priority list from them.
There is a north-side hospital proposed. Yes. And there are a couple of, I know there's 3 or 4 options. But I don't think Gungahlin Town Centre is proposed.
You probably want a hospital like that nearby. You probably don't want it in the town centre. Hospitals are quite deadening things generally. They're quite sealed. There's usually one entry. They create a lot of car traffic, and they generally are big, bulky buildings with... we don't do hospitals very well in Australia. They're not usually very nice places. So you might want it on the edge, but probably not in the centre. But we'll see. We'll see when we do the agency consultation what hit list or wish list they have.
I think they actually want to turn Calvary Hospital into
Just another quick one was in regards to, a lot of people are now using scooters more. I've even seen students going to school with scooters and things like that, and my kids have got scooters. But the thing is they obviously, the light rail is constructed in such a way you could take it on it, but you can't really use it during peak hour and things like that. So I noticed one of the pictures that was in there was in regards to secure storage of sort of bikes and things. And I recently watched a documentary. It was like in Japan, they have a thing where you get a bike and it puts it in a machine and sort of tucks it away into a thing. And because of the fact that they're quite expensive items, and in Civic we've had numerous incidents of people stealing the scooters and things like that.
Or thrown into the lake.
Into the lake. But would that be a consideration in the future of looking at a novel way in which somebody who has an expensive bike or has an expensive scooter could store that in a way in which
you mean a personal one as opposed
to the higher ones?
Part of that active transport, and one of that third pillar that we had, which is around a future-focused neighbourhood and ready in those ways, it's about encouraging public and active transport and having really interesting facilities. So in Brisbane, for instance, there's a bike hub which is under the busway under Queen Street Mall. It's run as a private business, and it's a bike storage workshop. So you can come and use it as showers. And so there's a lot of different examples around the world of how those types of facilities work.
The Dutch do it very well.
Dutch, they have 6-storey car park,
multi-storey bike parking.
Kids come in, everyone, like at their highways, this major network. So there's lots of examples of those globally, and they are often very well linked with community facilities or other kind of community anchors as well. So
and that's what I was thinking. There are a lot of bike shops that tend to be around, and whether or not there could be a way in which the government could pair with one of those in order to, so it's not the government's sort of responsibility as such, but maybe subsidised in some way in which you could tack something onto that. So it's an interesting that I saw a picture that kind of illustrated that.
We purposely kind of put some of those in there. So the part of the image pack was looking at different ideas and things that really were quite important for this site. So that's why it's nice you noticed.
Thanks, Phil.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Team SLA. It was great.
Thank
All
you
right.
for having us.
Hope we will have the
Appreciate your
ongoing
time.
engagement
Look
with you
forward to
guys.
seeing you later on in the new year.
Yes.
All right. Finally, we're going to welcome Peter to talk about the draft Gungahlin district strategy. So you will. It's there. I'll come. Over to you, Peter.
Okay, thank you. Well, from the sublime to the ridiculous. Look, I'm really encouraged by what the SLA are talking about. I have to be honest, when this visioning meets the planning system is really where I have a lot of concern. So that's what I'd like to talk about this evening. The Community Council, the Gungahlin Community Council, like all the community councils, has been pretty actively tracking the reform of the territory planning system. I attended a workshop in early 2019 where we were going to work out how to do the community engagement for the planning reform project. And that workshop was really positive and really quite exciting, but largely ignored for the next 3 years. It's been a very tortured journey. But what I'd like to sort of flag with you are some of the key elements that have emerged and some of the key issues that the Community Council in Gungahlin has taken up, based a lot on our experiences over the last 5 years, campaigning very, very, very hard to improve the outcomes in the town centre, which of course directly led to the SLA's program engagement. I think it's really important to note that this did not happen by magic. This was a lot of community advocacy, and it's been something that's been long coming, so it's great to see it moving forward. Anyway, what I've gone back and done is just to pull out a few key things that have been part of this journey. So in late November 2020, the government released 7 policy direction papers. They didn't want anyone to comment on these, they just published them. And they basically said there's a problem with the planning system and we're going to fix it. And buried in about page 11 of the overview document are these 3 key messages. So this is the directorate themselves saying, this is what we have heard from the Canberra community, that the current system doesn't accommodate design quality or develop appropriateness. That's pretty bad, right? So doesn't put any value on quality or making sure the developments are appropriate. And it wasn't well placed to address the future planning challenges, but in particular, the complexity of the system is compromising the community's confidence in the system and in the ability of the community to fully participate in the planning process. So these are really pretty punchy lines, and they're actually published in their book. And this was done in late 2020. The papers were actually ready in early 2020, but were delayed for reasons probably related to something happening in October 2020. But they were released in November. And out of that came a series of processes where they're going to come up with a new planning system, which is going to be easy to use, provide certainty, flexibility, transparency, and be outcomes focused. Now, most of the community councils and most of the industry people are still trying to get a good, clear description of what outcomes focused means. I think it's something like what Ben and Nicole and the team have been talking about just now, but it's a bit unclear. So we're not really sure what outcomes focused is, and the way it has emerged is that they published, after a year of so-called consultation, it was mostly, this is what we're planning to do, you've got 5 minutes to ask some questions, okay, next section is what we're planning to do. So they put out a new planning act, this is 700 pages of legislation, and asked the community to comment on this, which is ridiculous because it's 700 pages of legislation about planning. It's almost indecipherable, even to the people who are meant to decipher it. But that was published without the territory plan and the new district strategies that would accompany it. And so that's led to, as Henley mentioned, inquiry into the planning bill, and it's amusing. The views of the community organisations and the views of industry are very similar and not aligned to what the government's saying. So there's been a sequence of Community Planning Act come out, and then they've released a new territory plan and district strategies to comment on just recently. Oh, by the way, that's not everything. There are some design guides that are not yet out, so it's all sort of coming out, so we can't see the big picture. But what we are very confident in is that we don't have a lot of trust in what's going on because we haven't been part of developing it. So the community as a whole is a bit strained and pained about all this, and it'll be interesting to see what the inquiry, the ACT Assembly Planning Committee discover in their planning. So next slide, please. So we responded to the bill and made the point that we're not experts on legislation, but what we know is what we've experienced in the last 5 years, and that is the current system can't be trusted to do the right thing. The current planning rules for the Gungahlin Town Centre, for example, aren't delivering good outcomes like we've just heard described with a bunch of block-by-block developments that are like little islands in an ocean. They don't work together well at all. And we kind of expect, there's someone that will look after the people and make all the right decisions about planning and then make sure they get implemented. So we think that's the system it's the planning system should do that. And it's really making sure that it actually enshrines what the community want in a system so that, the commercial folk don't say, well, this site, I know it's only got approved for 70 units, but we can easily fit 200 on it, and that sort of stuff. And the planning system should reject that and should defend what is right. And really, we've not seen that in the last 20, 30 years in Canberra, and we really need some trust rebuilt. And because the consultation process was poor, we still have a lack of trust in what might... This new system may in fact be wonderful if you could understand it, and I certainly can't, but we haven't been part of the process. We haven't been engaged. So yeah, I mentioned this, the issue around the legislation coming out without the territory plan and the district plan that are coming, and there have been no examples to say, look, this development, if it was done under the new system, wouldn't be as ugly because we don't allow buildings to go straight in the ground without a decent frontage, or they're not aesthetically pleasing, or we wouldn't allow an entrance to a large underground car park within 50 metres of a set of traffic lights on a major feeder road, which is another example that was mentioned earlier on this evening. So we said, look, please don't get rid of pre-DAO consultations. All consultations should be well-informed and early, and that would damage it. Sure, they're not working perfectly, but let's fix them rather than throw them out. Put a definition of what good consultation is in the bill. Previously, it was actually something that was optional. That has in fact been adopted, although perhaps not with perfect words. And try to do more to engage the relevant stakeholders. Rather than speaking to all of Canberra, go and sit down with Pedal Power to talk about active travel issues and Friends of Walking. And if you're doing some parks, engage the Friends of Yerraby, talk to ACCOS. These groups, they're more valuable, more skilled, and will give better feedback than spending a lot of time trying to get 400,000 Canberrans to read your say papers. And again, I've brought just a handful. There's a short summary of the consultation process, and that's 50 or 60 pages long. So the volume and the detail is overwhelming. We also recommended that they conduct an inquiry, and that's another thing that's happening. So next slide. Just on the huge volume, and just back to the simplicity, the new Planning Act contains 600 and I haven't got my glasses on now, get this right, 648 new clauses. The old one contained 517. So we seem to have gone up by 20% in legal clauses. The district plan for Gungahlin is 193 pages. The original planning bill was 500. So huge volume of material, and a lot of it very detailed. And a lot of it matters. It's really important we get this right. So on to the next one. I have stolen some of these slides from the ACT government. They're the slides presented publicly some time ago. But I guess one of the more interesting things and very, very positive thing to have is taking a spatial view of the districts in Canberra. So every community council is very positive about this approach. We're a bit concerned they are just strategies and not plans to do something, but they're a good step. And there's a lot on the slide again, but for every district, they've gone and looked at the blue-green network, which is parks, creeks, those sort of stuff. How do you make neighbourhoods sustainable? Are they permeable, accessible, walkable, inclusive, good range of housing, for example? That the centres work, that there are centres, that they promote community wellbeing, provide community services, and that there's economic access and opportunity across the city. And this is again something all the community councils bang on about relentlessly as some services move out of some town centres and move to others, or never get developed at all, in the case of Gungahlin, and making jobs more accessible to home, which is the whole principle behind the districts in the first place from 50 years ago, was that people would be closer to work. And then strategically to improve how cars move around, points made by Henley and others this evening around active transport. So these 5 big drivers that get lumped into all the district plans. And I think the next slide is the Gungahlin one. Right, so for the Gungahlin one, under those 5 categories, and I'll just put my glasses back on and read for some prepared notes. There is a 3-page summary, I think it's 3 pages, which is quite digestible. This is quite good. And I guess the really key things for us is that some of our advocacy, and basically informed by the people of Gungahlin responding to things, really calls out under economic development the need to do an analysis of the capacity for a commercial employment, commercial floor space in the town centre, the need to do an analysis for the employment floor space across all of Gungahlin, plans to include competitive positioning analysis, community-based economic and targeted collaboration. These are the things we're looking for to see some proactive engagement on how do you build the town centre over and above just going, well, this block will be CZ1 and this will be CZ something else and this will have frontage. And now it's got to be more than that. It's not just planning, it's actual execution. So it's positive to see this in strategic movement. We've talked about improving connectivity to the major growth centres, Casey, Moncrief, Amaroo, particularly as some of those are planned to have more intense numbers of residences, particularly in Casey. So it's good to see that's come through. But in particularly under, it's not captured in this point here, but to undertake a review of group centres to support ongoing viability and role as a community space. And sometimes this works. If you look at the local centre in Crace, for example, that's a really good combination of retail and parking and some medium density retirement living nearby, really good mix. And then you can see other local centres that struggle a bit because they haven't got that mix and balance right. So that's good. And then there's some acknowledgements in here around the chronic shortfall of community and recreation facilities across Gungahlin as a whole. So in general, you read this and think, that's great. And then you look very carefully and go, where's the timeline and where's the money to make this happen? And the answer is there ain't none. They're just a strategy. It's like a plan. It's a planning system. It's an intent. It's not actual commitments to deliver. So the challenge is how do you build a strategy that actually has, and now we're going to execute it by doing the following things by the certain following times. And so that's a bit of a concern for us. But overall, the district strategy is heading in the right direction. It's trying to land it properly. The reason it's really important for all of you in the room and those online is everyone's being asked to make their views on these strategies and the overall territory plan, provide their feedback on these. So even though it's a lot to digest, there are some summaries that you can read in maybe 5 minutes. So it's not all bad. So next slide, please, Shah. The other part of the district plan is the inevitable map. Now, unfortunately, they've only provided these maps in a very low, unzoomable resolution, so it's very hard to get down to it. And in some maps in some districts, things like the sale of the CSI Road, Ginninderra side is a very big part of what they have, these future exploration areas. Here in Gungahlin, they're just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them in the very southern corners. southern end of the district, where they're looking at potential further development where there's either nothing there or something else. Now, these are all currently rural blocks, and one of these is proposed, the owner of that site's proposed at the Community Council meeting last month before, a very large retirement and aged care facility on that site. So that would be a really positive thing, not only for Gungahlin, but for the rest of northern Canberra, because there's a shortage of those services. And so there's a lot of detail here around, which sites might be intensified. You'll notice that Casey is called out as an intensification area, and there are sort of other areas where there's potential growth and stuff. But relative to some districts, there's not a lot of surprises here. In the plan itself, there's some detail about some of these sites in the south and what they can be used for. They've actually mapped out the actual shape of the size of the suburb of Kenny after the new park, new nature reserve, the Najquang Nature Reserve is gazetted. So overall, it's good and it's got a lot of detail, but it is hard to read because that's the highest resolution map that's been made available. Right, okay, so what do we have to say about this? Well, we've put some quick bullet points together around some of the things we thought were worthy of note. So, the fact that they've called out things we've been advocating on, the first two items in particular, really positive. Looks like banging away for 5 years does get there eventually. Certainly the need to investigate active transport is something that's popped up recently with the proposed 9-storey residential tower in the Casey Group Centre, which is a bit of a surprise to the residents of Casey. And their biggest concern is the impact it'll have on traffic, particularly as that area has a lot of schools, both proposed and current. What we see, a lot of people are expecting better green spaces, more sustainable neighbourhoods, so we can't argue with that, and we're encouraged by the development of the aged care and retirement facility in the south, should that proceed, so that's good. So that's kind of our overall feelings. On top of, district strategies sound like a good thing. How do we make them stick? How do we convert the strategy into execution? So last one. Just this week, the ACT government indicated they're going to extend the consultation on all of this until the 3rd of March. There are some voices out there saying it should be longer than that, to be deeper into the new year. So we'll see how that goes, but it's of course on the Have Your Say website, and hopefully there'll be some additional workshops and strategies coming out of it. At the moment it's a case of absorbing a lot of documentation and providing feedback. So yes, if any of those comments and ideas that Community Council have worked up don't gel for any of you listening or here, please let us know. Basically what we think is what you think, and it's very hard to tap into all of your minds at any given instance, so please provide us your feedback. Now, of course, just to be confusing, this is a completely separate piece of work to the Suburban Land Agency's placemaking for East Gungahlin Town Centre, which is going on at the same time. I think if you had to spend any time, I'd spend more time on the SLA stuff. I think that's got more interest and more likelihood of getting some traction anytime soon. The planning stuff is, of course, pretty important, but it is more difficult to get your head around. Last one? Maybe the last one. That's it. That's all right. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, happy to take them on board. Just a quick point on the active travel stuff. If you guys haven't lined up a time to speak to Pedal Power, please do so. I'm also involved with Pedal Power, but with both a Gungahlin Community Council and Pedal Power hat on, I participated in the active travel feasibility study for the town centre. That's been finished but not yet released. I don't know why. But there's a lot of robust feedback about learnings from the West Gungahlin Town Centre, so you need to perhaps dig that out as well. So thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Anything else?
Thanks everyone for coming tonight. I think, as I said, this is the last one for this year. We will see you on Feb. Hope you all have a good holiday season, and wish you all a Merry Christmas. Let's remember the reason for the season, and wish you all a Happy New Year. God bless. Good night.